Okay, so my name is Christopher Nosko. I am the founder of Prague UX Writers. We've been meeting a little over a year. Usually, we used to meet in person. We'd either go to a company's space like Avast or Wrike or something like that, and they would host us, and we'd have a lot of goodies and good food. Or we'd go to a bar and just sit around and talk casually and hang out and talk about UX stuff, and also eat some really good food and drink some beer. Unfortunately, with the way things are going, we haven't been able to do that for a little while recently, but we're still doing it on Zoom. We're still keeping it up, still having a good time. So I do want to introduce my first speaker, who's going to be talking about UX writing style guides, Becca Vaughan. She's a former coworker and a good friend of mine, and she really spearheaded this whole thing in Avast when we were both working there. So I'm really excited for her to talk about what she's done and what she's been doing. So Becca, why don't you take it away?
Cool, thanks so much for the intro. Yeah, like Chris said, my name is Becca Vaughan. I live here in Prague. I've been here for about 5 years, but I'm originally from North Carolina, USA. Also, great barbecue there if you haven't tried it. Yeah, so let's see. I think I will. Oh, you already gave me remote control. Is that right? So I can. Chris, do you know if you gave me control of the PowerPoint? Is that right?
I did. It says waiting for Rebecca Vaughan to control your screen. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
Use the arrows to go back.
Yeah, okay.
There you go. Okay.
Sneak peek. Okay. Tech issues, right? Yeah, I joined Avast about a year ago now in November of 2019. So just past my 1-year anniversary, and organizing and creating guides is something that I've always been passionate about. So as soon as I arrived there, I asked to be a part of the style guide and creating that project. So yeah, the style guide, of course, is just a set of guidelines that cover the words we use in our products and also rules of grammar, vocabulary, punctuation. And the goal of these guidelines is to help create consistent in-app copy, no matter who's writing it. So today, this talk is based on a case study that I wrote for the design blog. And I'll just cover some of the process of what I went through to create this guide, some of the pros and cons of the different platforms that we used along the way, some examples from our current set of guidelines, and also some next steps and plans for the future. So before I get started, I also want to give a big shout out to my team. So Alyssa is here. She's also one of the UX writers at Avast. And Clayton, I think, is coming also. He is our fearless team leader at Avast and has been a great help to us. Yeah, there's Clayton. Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
And also one last shout out to Adriana, who helped us create this presentation and make it beautiful. So kudos to her as well. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so life before the guide. I didn't experience it personally at Avast, but I did work at another company as a UX writer and the only UX writer. So I know for years at Avast, there was just one single person, Clayton, and he was writing for all of the products in the company and bouncing around. And so it really didn't leave much time for him to create a style guide. And although he has this like this huge set of knowledge that's in his brain, that was one thing that I was really excited to be a part of, is making it official and making it some tangible, I guess, online. But yeah, so with these massive workloads and deadlines, it didn't leave much time, as well as UX writing being somewhat of a new field. Just recently, a lot of companies have started publishing their own guidelines, which have been a huge help and inspiration to us, and without which we could not have probably created as comprehensive as a guide that we have now. So life before the guide, a few things that were that we noticed. First of all, we had like a set of brand guidelines that was really vague and outdated. So when I came in, it had like a few pages of writing guidelines, but it lacked a lot of specific UX writing rules. These were mostly focused on visual design, just a few things in general on UX. And yeah, it didn't really cover a lot of the stuff that we would be asking. We also had limited help from external guidelines. We used the was written for journalists and not really UX writers. So although we could get some help from there, it didn't cover things like, should we add periods at the end of our headlines, or the best way to word specific things, depending on specific messages. We also got very inconsistent copy from non-UX writers. When we get the designs to work on, usually the placeholder copy is written by product managers, designers, or developers. And so it ended up being inconsistent and also had a lot of typos and grammar mistakes. And then there was also no single source of truth. We would create the copy for these designs, and then as soon as we sent it away, files were outdated and things would change. We also kept the wireframes in Zeppelin, but they were hardly ever updated when new copy was updated, and it was really difficult to track down the latest thing that we had worked on, and the finalized version of copy usually goes through tons of different versions before we agree on something, and so that just never made it to one place where we could look at it for future reference. And then all of this kind of resulted in a whole bunch of wasted time and energy. A lot of this time was used to search through old tickets, looking for what we agreed on, and it just created kind of this mess of not being able to find what we were looking for. And it was an exhausting way to spend that time. So yeah, and of course, sorry, that also resulted in these frequent interruptions because yeah, a lot of the questions that we were asked could have been easily answered by just looking in a guide. So that's another benefit that came from putting it all in one place instead of asking the single UX writer that worked in the company. You could just go look at the style guide yourself and find the answer. So yeah, there was a huge difference once we did create the style guide, especially I think for Clayton, who was no longer the single UX writer in the company and no longer had to retain all this information in his brain. So yeah, there were a lot of benefits that came along with the style guide. First and foremost is consistent copy. Having a set of guidelines helped improve consistency both between products and also within products, which greatly improves user experience and helps people feel confident when they're using our products, and also reaffirms trust in the brand. It also helps simplify a lot of our decision making. A lot of the time when we would have to make a choice about copy, we would do a bunch of research and go through a bunch of different scenarios to come up with the best version, and then we would just forget about it immediately because we didn't record it and write it down. And now that's not so much a problem anymore because we have it all kind of tucked away in an organized place where we can look back at it and collect all of our findings for future similar issues. This helped efficiency a lot. Having this clear set of rules helped designers and writers work together much better, and also helped us to solve UI problems and UX copy writing problems simultaneously, which was really great. It also empowered our designers. So a lot of the time there was not a writer there who was available to answer questions immediately or help out. And still at Avast, we have just 2.5 writers. I am the half. I forgot to mention that I'm also a part-time or a full-time student and then working at Avast part-time. So we have just 2.5 people there working on 50 plus products. And so realistically, there's just not enough time or not enough people to answer all the questions that come our way. So having this style guide empowered designers to just go check for themselves, and then although they would usually have to, or they should always get it checked by a writer before it's published or put into final designs. But it did help them create better placeholder copies. So then we were at a better starting point at the time that they would come ask us for help. And lastly, this really improved our brand image. Having this set of guidelines, it's now public, and it helps us establish our voice, improve our image by just showing our personality and our goals and being transparent about what we have to offer. And yeah, it makes it easier to kind of spread that information when we can clearly define who we are through this set of guidelines. So moving on to the process, the first steps involved a lot of messy, kind of long and rough guidelines, or outlines, I would say. So first of all, I kind of just read and looked through every style guide that I could find, which was a great starting point for me because not only did it give me inspiration, but it allowed me to find info that was relevant to us. And so what I did was when I would find something that I thought would apply to our products or that someone asked about, we copy and paste that relevant info. And then at the end, we went through and made everything our own, which is the most important thing. So tweaking that guide to be specific to us, specific to our goals and our products really helped us to kind of establish a good first draft. And of course, we were inspired by a lot of different places, a lot of different guides along the way. Shopify, for example, has a really great style guide, and we adopted their actionable language section, or like we have a section that's inspired by the way that they did it, which was really great and helped us a lot to work with CTAs, especially. We also checked out Atlassian style guide. They have some amazing info about messaging, specifically like error messages and success messages. And then we also took a lot of our inclusive language style guides from BuzzFeed, who has a very comprehensive style guide and also a great word list. And so these were just a few of the ones that we took inspiration from. Of course, there are many others. Google's material design is amazing. Apple has some great guidelines. MailChimp is a classic. But it was really difficult to find one that had comprehensive guidelines for both design and writing components combined together. So a lot of them were specifically focused on design or specifically on writing, but there were not many that had like a comprehensive overview of both together. So the first draft, of course, after finding all this info, copying and pasting it, went into Google Docs. This was a really great starting point for us, but it definitely became this dumping ground of information. It was way more like a detailed outline than an actual set of guidelines. And of course, it just blew up. It got super long. I used this auto generated table of contents, which ended up being like 2 or 3 pages alone, without even like going through the content. And of course, they had like smaller chunks, like you could go and each one was just a small chunk of info, but it was super long. It took like a few minutes just to load before you could even search through it. And I think the whole thing was around 40 pages, which is crazy. So yeah, the positives were that it was very searchable, it was very comprehensive, and we could also comment as team members, which had our names there, so we could see what feedback we had from each of our team members. But it was way too long. We couldn't expand and collapse sections, so it just became way too huge, and it looks terrible, of course. Google Docs is, a good starting point, but as like a finished document, it just doesn't quite work unless it's more written. At least for our purposes, it was not an adequate final product. So then the next step that we moved to was CML. CML is like an internal documentation hub for Avast. And we did have a lot of further formatting options, which was really great. This is just the first page that we had. So there was a noticeable change with these formatting options. It no longer looked like this draft. We had these expandable, collapsible chunks of info, which was really great. And we could organize it in this logical structure. And so it got us really excited as a team because it finally felt real. But there were, of course, some pros and cons for this. We had these expandable, collapsible sections. The size was less intimidating, and we had this clear outline. But the formatting issues were still not exactly where we wanted them to be. And I think the biggest con was that it wasn't searchable. Although we had expandable sections, you had to expand all of them before you could search. And so it just didn't work for people that were looking for a specific answer. And of course, it was only available to Avast employees since this was our internal documentation hub, which we wanted to make available to the world. And so we moved on to our latest platform, which is Zero Height. This is the one that we are currently using, and it is so much better. I highly recommend. And it's also the host of our design team's visual guidelines and general writing guidelines for the rest of our writing teams. And it's just been a dream compared to the others. So it's really helped this guideline come to life. Not only is it much prettier to look at, but there's a lot more power behind the platform, and we can also organize it in a way that is that makes a lot more sense, and we can chunk information together that's related. It has a lot of customization options, far more than Google Docs or CML. And it's very easy to use. I can definitely say that it didn't take long to figure out how to format things properly and also share things. You can share links to just specific sections, even on a page. And the search feature is fantastic. It's probably my most favorite thing about the platform. It's so easy to find things. And so it makes it really fast and easy for people to use. So yeah, the pros that we have for Zero Height is definitely searchability. That's number one. It is now our single source of truth, and it's a great resource for not only our UX writers, but also our designers. And it's pretty and easy to use. And yeah, it works for a lot of different teams. So it's a great place to kind of not only for UX, but as a company to keep it all in one place and come together for whatever kind of info you need. Cons, of course, are that we have some overlapping info, especially since we have writing teams that focus on different types of writing. We have been working to combine that in a way that makes sense. And it's also, it is very comprehensive, but that means that there's a lot to do, there's a lot to update, and there's always more things that we find that are not part of our guide. And then lastly, we have limited number of people that have access to the platform. So right now, I think there are only 3 of us that have access to work on the style guide, but hopefully we can get some more people helping with it in the future. So here are some examples of the things that we added. One of the things that we were asked about the most, which were like the top 5 things that people struggle with or that we want to communicate to the rest of the design team. So we created these in one page, and then they link, of course, to longer, more specific articles about each topic. But our top 5 tips include punctuation, headlines, and subheads, double checking your spelling and some common mistakes, double checking vocabulary and making sure that we're using the right words for our company, and then avoiding technical jargon, making it human and conversational. And then also, of course, double checking with your writer anytime that you need to make a change, and not just making those on your own and applying them to design without any kind of final review. And then a couple other examples. This is an example of the actionable language section that we were inspired by Shopify. We created a list of common CTAs and common verbs that we find that are similar but make a big difference. And so we also try to include examples for everything as much as we can. So here you can see we use maybe later instead of not now, or any of these other alternatives. And then this last example is our words and terms. This is one that we use a lot, and this is a section that applies to all of our writers of all different styles, and this was a really fun one to format and kind of get together. So this showcases the searchability of the guidelines super well, because you can search for any word and it'll pop up in the alphabetized list of terms that are approved for Avast products. And yeah, so of course we did create this with the intention of it being a living document, and one of the most important things is for us to be able to adapt it and change it and update it with whatever info that we are missing or that would be helpful for the rest of our team. So we created this Kanban board on Notion. This is one that I use Notion for my personal task management. And yeah, so as I kind of thought of things that I needed to add and didn't have time at that moment, I started creating this great Kanban board. And I highly recommend it for anyone who's starting on a project like this, because yeah, there are always more things to add. And yeah, I think that's it for my presentation. So Chris, back to you.
Thank you so much, Becca. We're getting a sneak peek again. One thing that I did forget to mention in the beginning, feel free to go ahead and put any questions that you guys have in the chat. We're going to get to that afterwards, and we're going to do a nice little Q&A at the end. But yeah, that's funny you ended on Kanban boards, because now we're going straight into Wrike, who does Kanban boards and Gantt charts and tables and all that other stuff. Wrike's a project management software. They do a whole lot of stuff. And so I wanted to show you guys a couple examples of our style guide. Like Avast, we're also trying out Zero Height. It might not be our final place that we're going to have everything, because some designers want to have their stuff in other places. We just need to find a unified place, but that's okay. You try some things, you see what you like, you pitch it to the other team, you know, and you figure out what works best for everyone. So, but here are a few of our examples. So for conversational tone, I wanted to show people how to talk like a human, essentially, because we've all had those error messages where you see like beep boop, incorrect password, error code 8675309, and that tells us nothing. You know, like how many times have you taken that error code and copied it, written it down or whatever, and when you're talking to customer service, you're like, oh, here's my error code. Nobody does that. So what we can do to be a little more helpful is sound more human. If you were sitting next to somebody, you wouldn't say incorrect password. You'd say, I don't think that's the right one, or that password doesn't look right. It's just something we would use more often. I have noticed a lot, especially in Slavic countries, that some people tend to use he as default. So for example, you can see the one on the right here. Can you see my cursor? Yes, you can. Beautiful. Invite a team member so he can get started. I'll see stuff like this a lot. That's not really something you want to be using. More inclusive language would be saying they. So invite a team member so they can get started, because again, you don't know who's going to be getting started. You don't know who's going to be buying a subscription. You don't know who's going to be doing whatever. So you do want to be inclusive there, and never, 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 ever use it. I've had a couple of people do that before, completely dehumanizing. Please do not ever use that. When talking about the generic third person, some people, they'll try to go a little bit more a step in the right direction, and they'll say something like he or she. The problem is that it gets kind of complicated. Like if you look at this option, he or she can see what days he or she is working on the calendar. It's too complicated. Just say they can see what days they're working on the calendar. If it's a generic third person, you are able to use they, and that does work. That's a question that comes up a lot as well. Let's see. Capitalization. So when you write things in all caps, it really reduces readability. Just think about if you're on like Facebook or Twitter and you hit a post and it's just the whole thing is in all caps. You're probably automatically going to assume the person is rambling or feel like they're shouting at you or something like that. It's just not very friendly to people. If you're typing in a sentence or something like that and you really want to make sure that it's emphasized, just use bolding instead. It's a whole lot more readable for people. Okay, so this one will sometimes start arguments depending on which writers you're talking to, but I like the Oxford comma. It helps cut down on some confusing situations. You can see that here, right after folders. So Wrike has tasks, folders, and spaces. We add a comma after folders, and I'll show you why. In the first sentence, you're saying, I had eggs, toast, and orange juice. In the second sentence, you say, I had eggs, toast, and orange juice. If you separate all the ideas with a comma, it helps solidify in people's minds that these are completely separate, because some people might accidentally take this as two things. Okay, some other readability stuff. For US English, of course, you localize everywhere. So if you're not writing in US English, localize it for whatever you're writing for. But in US English, we use commas to separate that groups of thousands. In other countries, they'll use periods. We'll use of when talking about progress. So instead of saying 35 out of 46 tasks, we'll just say 35 of 46 tasks. If you're a little crunched on space and you can't put the of, because that's a space, OF space, you can add a slash. Just make sure for readability purposes, again, and this kind of goes against some rules, like grammar rules, but they're readability rules, add a space between the number and that slash there. Another great thing about zero height, and I think we were actually doing this in Google Docs too, but you can add these see other sections. Oh, that pops up, that's not good. You can add like see slashes and that'll take you to other parts of the guide. It'll help some people see some parts that are connected. Units of measure. So this one, actually, when I was in Avast with Becca and Clayton, we had some discussion on this one, but we eventually landed on writing numbers, space, unit of measure, and we looked it up, we did some research, and we figured out, yeah, this is the best way to write it, and so that's what we put in there. So you don't do the 50 GB right up against each other, you do have that space. I'm going to show you a funny example, though, from Wrike's pricing page that I found a couple months ago. You can see that we weren't necessarily consistent all the time. For the first one, we had 2, G lowercase b, no space. Second one had 5 space, G with a lowercase b. And then you had 50 gigabytes, but there's no space there. And then you have 100 and then gigabytes, but lowercase b. We did have a couple examples of it correctly, but I was able to reach out to the marketing team and say, hey, this is what's in our guide. Let's please unify all of this and make it look somewhat professional, please. And lastly, rules can sometimes be broken. So in UX writing, we don't always follow rules, which means if you do use something like Grammarly, you're sometimes going to get some really annoying emails because they'll tell you your top 3 mistakes. Missing period, missing closing punctuation. Well, you don't add a period at the end of a headline. So unfortunately, it's hard to tell Grammarly that. Or you've got missing article. So let's say we wanted to say, originally the sentence was start for free. You can drop the for and just say start free. But of course, it's not grammatically correct. So Grammarly is going to throw up a flag. But anyway, we're not writing for grammar fanatics. We're writing for people. And like this says, language is fluid and sometimes rules can be broken as long as it's done strategically and consistently. So for example, similar one as before, try it for free is a correct way to say it, but you can drop the it and say try for free. But one really important thing to put in this section, if you're putting a section like this in there, is that writers have final copy decisions when discussing when to break the rules. I've had some issues in the past with some PMs and things like that when they want to break rules and it's really not a great time to be breaking that rule or way to be breaking that rule. I believe Becca's had some interactions like that as well. You really got to make sure that people understand we are breaking this rule, but there's a reason for it and we're doing it consistently. So talking about things and ways that you can break some rules, this one actually tripped me up early on. Before I started working at Wrike, which is project management software, I was working on another similar project management software. It was one of my first UX writing jobs. And since I grew up with the grammatical rules, number 1 through 9, you write out as a word, and then 10 and on, you can write as a number. I was writing things like 7 new messages and using the word 7 in the UI, which wasn't great. I eventually learned, hey, when it comes to UI, it's much easier for people scanning pages to just see a number and read it. It's a whole lot easier. Let's see. Another place that we're breaking the rules a little bit is with end dashes. We figured out based on some testing stuff that having that dash, having some space on either side of that end dash actually made it a little more readable. So we're doing that as well. Again, most style guides, like grammar style guides, tell you not to do that. But it's okay to break the rules as long as it helps with readability and your users understand it and you're just staying consistent across your product. That's basically it for me. Style guides we've been inspired by. We already talked about Shopify. I never pronounced his damn name right. Atlassian and BuzzFeed. Shopify definitely helped me out a lot as well. They have a very great style guide. They do a really great job of melding the words and the other design stuff. Like Becca said, a lot of style guides will just do one or the other. MailChimp, of course, they're a classic. They definitely helped me out, and Google Material Design did as well. I think Apple did as well. I don't see that one on here, but yeah, Apple was definitely one of the ones there. That is it for me, though. Becca, do you have anything else to add before we jump into Q&A?
Not really. I think you did a great job. I loved your examples.
Oh,
yeah. But yeah, there's some good questions in the chat, so we can.
Sweet.
I see that Clayton is already answering some of them, so thank you for that. He is good.
Yeah, sorry, I jumped in there.
Nice.
Sorry, go ahead. Okay, never mind.
I think we lost Clayton. Never mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Yana Cheska asks, UX writing style guide is kind of comparable with design systems. You experience similar problems, like design system is an organism that needs to be cared for by a designated person or team. Becky, you want to go first?
Yeah, Clayton had a great answer to this one as well, but I would agree that writing guidelines are similar in the sense that they are also an organism. It needs to be cared for and updated, and there are constantly things that come up which are not answered in the style guide or which contradict what's there in the style guide. Sometimes we'll add something there, and then through applying those rules, we find places where it doesn't work. And then, of course, we need to go back and reevaluate those rules. And that's just a very normal part of kind of improving it and making it more comprehensive and covering all the situations that we needed to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. These things, I have written in my style guide somewhere that this is meant to be a living, breathing document. If we find that sometimes things don't work, that's okay. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out how to fix that. If it's something that we fix with copy, great, let's fix it with copy. If it's something that can't be fixed with copy and we have to fix it in the design, let's do it. Let's just figure out how to get that problem done, and then we write it down in the style guide, or like whatever we decide. Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's see. What else do we have? Clayton's putting Vampire Weekend songs in the chat. Grammarly is connected in practice, yeah. What's the most common problem besides being overwhelmed by the backlog?
I would say.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I would say finding places where our own rules don't work. You know, there are always exceptions, and writing copy is really on a case-by-case basis, or it should be. And so it's not really a cookie cutter thing. Like, as much as we try to create these rules, there will always be places where those rules don't apply. And also, I know specifically in our punctuation guidelines for headlines and subheadlines, we always leave out punctuation for our headlines, and we always add a period to our subheadlines. But in many of our designs, there are these little blurbs of text that don't really qualify as a subheadline or a headline.
Definitely,
kind of and so, like, justifying our choices is often not very straightforward. I think we even have it written in our style guide somewhere. If this doesn't fit in either of these categories, do what feels right. And that's not really something that is conducive to guidelines per se. You know, it's just sometimes you just have to kind of make those judgment calls, and it's not really something you can put in words or put into a rule.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo you on the where to draw the line of the headline, subheadline, because sometimes we'll have like little toast notifications pop up and either like confirmation, like, oh, that worked, or that didn't work, here's why. And sometimes you're like, oh, do I put a period there? Do I not? We kind of erred on the kind of like the whatever feels right. We were like, if it's an incomplete sentence and it feels okay, just, you don't have to put one, but just, you know, just feel it out, which unfortunately is a bit ambiguous. I would say one of the other problems that I have faced and have been facing is figuring out a system that works for the whole design team. Because some people have their documentation in an internal system, some people have their documentation in Google Docs, some people have their documentation somewhere else. And other than, you know, making a landing wiki page and linking to other places, it's really hard to get people to where they need to go. And so trying to find either the one tool that does work for everybody or finding an efficient way to move people around, it can be a little challenging. We're working on that one now, though. But yeah, I'd say that would be one of the bigger struggles when like creating a style guide, just figuring out where you're going to put it and making it as accessible as possible from as many people as possible within the organization, at least. Let's see. What app do you use to control your grammar? Becca, what you got?
I also use Grammarly. I use it kind of for drafting messages, and it does a good job of catching typos or misspellings, making sure that it's, you know, nothing obvious that I've missed before I put it in a design. But I think that's personal preference. I know several other people on the team that really don't like Grammarly and just choose to use Google Docs for drafting or like a text edit program. I think different things work for different people. So yeah, I just prefer, I like Grammarly. I think it's nice. I like those summaries, although I do also get notifications that I'm missing periods all the time, and you know, they're wrong. They don't know it, but
it's the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Grammarly a lot too. I have heard of some people using CML content management tools like Frontitude and Dribble. Not Dribble. Oh, I can't remember. It starts with a D, but I've heard of some people using some of those tools. I tried using them myself, but they just felt a little clunky. One really great thing though about that is, like, let's say that your company, you've decided to use delete instead of the word remove. If somebody types in the word remove, it'll let you know, like, hey, we usually use the word delete here. Did you mean the word delete? If you have the corporate version of Grammarly, it does that as well. I haven't been able to get it working, but a lot of people tell me it works. So that's something that I've been trying to get working for a while. But yeah, I like Grammarly. Usually I'll type it into Figma to see if it'll fit, and then I'll put it in Grammarly to see if it works. And then if it works, then great. If not, I'll copy what's in Grammarly and put it back in Figma, because that would be great if they eventually had a Grammarly extension, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
There are also some extensions on Figma. I know there's one called Ditto. There's one.
Ditto, that's the one. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Ditto has been, I don't know, I haven't gotten into it a whole lot, but it seems like a library. You can create like libraries of copy where you can label them as different parts of the UI. Like you can label what's a headline versus a CTA or whatever. But I don't know, I think our team has been testing it a bit, but so far I haven't found it super great. I don't know, I think I do need to test it more. But yeah.
I think it would be better if it was actually something within Figma, because unfortunately for these CMLs like Ditto and Frontitude, you have to leave Figma to go to it and then come back, and they have to like sync changes and things, and it's just a bit messy. There's another Figma plugin called Spell with 3 L's, and that's part of the joke, I guess. But with Grammarly, you can tell it sometimes like, hey, ignore like punctuation things. Like if you have bullet points and you don't have all of them capitalized, or if you're saying like name is active, the I isn't going to be capitalized, even though it's on the next line. Spell is always trying to fix all these things, and it eventually gets more annoying than helpful. I'm sure they'll flush out the product later, and you can tell it to ignore certain things, and then it'll be better. It also has to scan every frame, and that takes a long time if you're working in big Figma files. Like it can take like a couple of minutes to scan every single layer and all that, and try to find text and correct things. Yeah, so Grammarly, put it back and forth. Best way I've done it so far. Let's see. That's Clayton answering somebody again. One question. I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering your name, but Bretta? I think it's Bretta?
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
that sounds fancy. Okay, cool. They asked, so at some point you created collection of rules, examples, content guides, etc. Now, how did you make it happen that it's used in the whole product? That's a fun one. What I had to do was, because I did something recently where I had to take every confirmation message, like every modal window in our product, and make it consistent with each other and clean them up a bit because they were really messy. But we talked about that a couple talks. Maybe it was the last talk. We recently talked about that. But the way that I did that was I sat down with every designer and asked them to find all the modal windows and things, and then I had to fix them and then tell them, okay, this is how we're doing it, going it forwards. I'm sure there's a better way to do that. I hadn't found it, but Becca, if you have a better way of doing that, please let me know. I'd love to hear Clayton's insight on that one actually too, because he's very experienced in this.
I'd love Clayton's opinion as well, because he has much more experience than both of us combined, probably.
Well, it's yeah, it's still tricky because right now our style guide is relatively new, and we introduced it, I guess, publicly to the company before Christmas, and before that it was kind of sitting there. The design team knew about it, the designers knew about it, but we weren't really ready to show it to the rest of the company. Yeah, there's no like magic solution to just pressing a button and updating everything all across all of your apps and websites all at once.
I wish.
You're going to get pushback from some people, and basically my philosophy is basically you still have work to do. It's impossible to magically change everything overnight. So focus on the most important things, the things that could cause problems, and then just do it as you go. When you find things that are out of date, update them. And the point of having the style guide is people can also, other people in the company can look at the style guide and fix things if they see them. So yeah, but
so hopefully really going forwards, people won't be doing the thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe one more question to that. Have you started with some plan? You're talking about the most important stuff. Maybe what was the plan at the beginning, and how did you map? I guess there is a lot of screens where to for example, in our product, we have a lot of screens where are messages, and it's almost like a detective, you know, to find
Yeah,
it.
yeah, you're right. Yeah. Oh, one helpful thing I found was if you go to the teams and go to the devs and say, hey, every modal window, please show it to me, like take a screenshot or do something and show it to me. They can go in the code usually and find these things a little more easier than us like clicking everything and trying to find every scenario. Because I don't know your product, I don't know how complicated it is, but for my product and for Becca's product as well, we can't find all of them because some of it is going to be something like, oh, you'll get this 6 months later after this one specific thing has happened or something along those lines. So yeah, I would definitely recommend going to your teams and saying, hey, this is what I'm trying to find. Can you help me find it? And that's at least a good start to collect everything in one place. And then once you do kind of make the changes in Figma or whatever tool you're using, it's usually best to make some sort of design initiative and at least try to put it in their backlog or put it on their docket somewhere so that these teams can go in and make changes to the places that you've updated stuff.
I can actually second that. I must say that in our team, it worked best when we worked also with developers and we asked them to use Airtable, which they loved because like sending in the messages, it was kind of like punk. So we created a special Airtable where they just put all those messages, like the screenshots and the instances links to it. And then we could just come back to it. And actually even within the table, we started kind of like adjusting the copy and then kind of linking it to the tickets for the updates. So they kind of like it right now. So we are trying it with just it's simple. It's just error messaging and alerts, but it works.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's pretty interesting. I might have to look into that. I've used Airtable briefly for like on some other people's systems when they've set up an Airtable, but I've never played around with it myself.
We also worked with Notion a little bit, but I must say that for some reason the Airtable for the organization it worked better. So totally.
Yeah, I really like about Airtable that you can put the table data and you can also put their screenshot or whatever you want, and it's just next to each other, and then you can create views on that. You can sort it out, so it's quite good tool.
Cool. Yeah, you can probably because I was trying to think of like some potential problems with that, and the one I thought of was, well, in the mock we have everything exactly as it needs to be when we hand it to devs, but then again you could just put the Figma link in there and link it to that frame, so you could link somebody directly. So yeah, that's a pretty good idea. I might actually have to look into that.
Figma links.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I am so glad they maybe like 6 months ago added the link to specific frame thing, because before you just had to link to the document. Good luck finding something, but it's so much easier now. Okay, let's look at the next question. Okay, Clayton answering things. How do you cooperate with copywriters in their tone of voice guidelines? How much do your style guides overlap? Becky, you want to go ahead with that one?
Yeah, so we do have, I guess we have one set of tone and voice guidelines, really. We have one product under our umbrella called HMA, Hide My Ass, which is a VPN, and they have a very different tone. But for the rest of our products, we are generally working with one set of voice and tone guidelines, which really helps to kind of make it consistent already. We do, however, have quite a bit of overlap. I would say the things that we tried to combine are things like grammar, things like punctuation is really hard because UX specifically has a different set of rules than other types of writing. But I would say vocabulary and grammar are usually like the two things that we can combine. But yeah, we did create our different sets of guidelines independently, and then we kind of tried to merge them together after the fact. I saw another question about whether guidelines apply to blogs. I think it's somewhere in here. Yeah, do these
blog articles and social media posts.
Which I would say no. Those are kind of under different leaders as well. Clayton is the UX writing lead, and then we have another copywriting lead who kind of covers web copy, emails, and what else? Some of the ad campaigns. And then we have another writing lead who covers Academy articles, blog articles, and then social media, I think, is also under a different person. So that was one of the challenges with creating this set of guidelines, is to keep it as comprehensive as possible, but also to separate the information into the sections to which they apply. So of course, like designers wouldn't usually be going to look at guidelines for blogs. It just doesn't really apply. So we did our best to separate that information into more cohesive steps. So another great thing about Zero Height actually is the ability to have several different guides kind of linked there at the top. If you look back at some of those screenshots, we have all of our different writing guidelines there linked at the top, and you can switch between them like tabs, which is really great. And then they have like an entirely different table of contents there on the left, and it made it really easy to keep them in one place while also making sure that they're separated. So yeah, I hope that helped to answer. Clayton actually might have better insight on this one as well, because he has worked with all of these teams for a long time.
Hey, third surprise guest speaker, Clayton.
Yeah, I know. Surprise, Clayton. Put on the spot.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense, some of our UX writing guidelines, to apply them to long form copy like a blog.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't want to just abbreviate January as Jan 4 in the middle of a blog. You would just spell it out. But inside an app or a mobile app where you don't have much space, or in a table, it makes more sense to abbreviate the months. So that's just one specific example I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, from my side, basically when I first started making this UX style guide, I sat down with one of the copywriters, and we kind of went over both guides, and we realized that there were going to be some differences, like Becca said, like when it comes to periods and things like that. They usually aren't going to not end a sentence in a period in a blog or something. So we recognize there were going to be some differences, but we just tried to unify it as much as possible. If there were some disagreements there, we try to do a little bit of research, see what either some people that are really great at UX are doing, or just look up, even better, actually, look up studies from like a Nielsen Norman group or something like that on these issues. And that's usually a good way to kind of find the best way to go. We do have separate style guides now. Once we figure out a home for these style guides and all of them in one place, we might try to figure out a way to unify them a bit more. But yeah, basically just sit down with a copywriting team and just try to figure out, you know, where you can align and where you do need to be separated, like have different different rules for different things, essentially. Okay, let's see. We answer do these rules apply to blog articles and social media posts as well? Okay, yeah, I knew this question was probably coming. Do you have your guidelines open to everyone? We'd love to analyze and get some inspiration. Unfortunately, right now, I'm working towards that. Since my guide is still somewhat new-ish, the heads of UX wanted to run things by legal and figure out all of that stuff before making it public. But I do plan on making it public eventually. I'll probably post in the group when I do, and I'll post a link to it so people can see it. What about you, Becca? How's your guide?
I know that now it's available to the whole company, but I don't know if we've like kind of published it on our blog or made the whole world aware of it. I know that ours is also still definitely a work in progress. We just got all that information there and finalized, or not even, I shouldn't say finalized. It's a lot of things are still definitely in progress. But
what we will do though is I'll share this presentation. So the things that we have talked about, we can at least have those examples. I told my boss, like, hey, let me just show some quick examples, not the whole freaking thing. And he was fine with that. So I'll share what we have. I'll try to share more in the future. That's what we'll do right now. So, but yeah, thanks for asking. That's cool that people are interested in it. Hemingway app is also a great tool. I've tried using it before. I think I was testing that one in Grammarly at the same time, and I went with Grammarly. I might go back and play with Hemingway though. I think it had some kind of cool features. Can you write down the names of these tools? Sure. Let me make a note. Tomorrow I'll write down the names of the tools that we've talked about. Any tools specifically? Do you mean just like are you talking like Grammarly and every tool we mentioned, or do you mean the tools like that we're using for our style guide, or what was the name? Moni. Which tool specifically were you looking for? Is Moni with us? I don't see her name in the list. I'll tomorrow morning I'll write everything down. I'll put it in, if you're on Meetup, I'll put it as a comment in Meetup. You guys can see it there. If not, if you're in the Facebook group, I'll put it in the Facebook group too. By the way, if you're a UX writer and you're interested in joining Prague UX Writers, you can go request to join the Facebook page. Sometimes Facebook's weird. Sometimes you can find it in search and sometimes you can't. If not, just leave a comment on Meetup or send me a message or something like that, and we'll figure out how to get you in there. Okay. Clayton's talking about browser plugin. One more. How do you store text that you use in user interface? Do you store it as objects that include some structure? Do you change specific words through parameters? I'm not sure I follow the question. Becca, do you understand what that means?
I think he's asking if we store like the copy as part of the designs. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. If you use some tools for storing the messages or
Gotcha.
buttons you use, or what tools do you use, or if it is directly inside the code and then you need to change it again.
Figma, all day, every day. You've got the design, you can type in it, it's real time, it's collaborative. You and the designer can be working on the same thing at the same time, and you hand it straight to the developer. Super easy peasy.
Yeah, we use Figma as well, but I think Adriana might be able to help with this one because we do also have like design guidelines, but our copy is always done on a case-by-case basis, like for each specific design. So I don't know, are there any copy placeholders in the design systems guidelines? Because I think right now, no.
Well, the only placeholders that I currently use are for dates, for brand names, or product names, stuff like that. Because these also never get translated in localization, I just use placeholders for these. Otherwise, we have a system in devs. They have everything in GitHub. They take it from Figma, then they run it through localization, and they keep it in GitHub. If anything changes, I let them know, and they change it in GitHub. The final solution for this problem is that our design system is supposed to eventually hold something we call patterns, which means not just design elements like buttons and typography and UX writing guidelines, but the actual flows that are the final results. So you can see unified, let's say, sign-in flow for all products that Avast has. It can be 40 products, and they all should have very similar or same sign-in flow. So it will be in the design system guide, which will be eventually public too. And Zero Height is connected to GitHub. So it's super easy for developers to literally snatch code snippets and just use it directly. So that's the final solution. Right now, I have to let them know if anything changes. Eventually, it will be automated.
Cool, thank you. Adriana is one of the product designers at Avast, so she works with us on the security.
For about 3 more weeks.
I know, before she leaves us.
Yeah, then she's coming to Wrike.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that answered the question.
You're stealing her.
I am. Did that answer your question, man, or was there any other part of that? You're muted. Good? Okay, cool. All right, awesome. Okay, so what would you have done differently if you were to create the style guide or guides again? I would definitely have started sooner. I put it off for ages because it was one of those things that just seemed so large and intimidating that I needed like a ton of time to work on. In reality, you can just work on it like one chunk at a time. Like you can sit down and think of, okay, slashes. How am I going to do slashes? You look up the rules, you look up what people are doing, you look at best practices, and you just knock that chunk out. And then maybe next week you can do something else. And like, if you can sit down and do it all at once, fantastic. But a lot of us don't have time because a lot of us are either the only UX writer or one of the few. So I would just say, don't put it off. Do as much research as you can and just start somewhere.
I would say also, if you don't have time to like sit down and do it all at once, just make sure that you're recording things like as you come across them.
Yes.
Like if you have something where you're not sure what word to use or like how something is done, and you go through the effort of finding that answer, just make sure you throw it in a document or save the message on Slack somehow so you can come back to it later, because that'll be a great help for you, especially when you need to add examples. Like you can use real life examples from your product. Yeah, and just keeping track of what you're doing as you're doing it. And that's a great way to save time later, because you don't have to start from scratch or be like, what's that one thing? I remember I had something, but don't remember exactly what it is. Yeah. And the one other thing I would say is it would have been really awesome if I could have collaborated more with like different parts of our teams, like different teams, like especially with the different writers. We ran into some, not issues really, but like when it comes to the overlapping information, I think it would have been really helpful to all sit down together and kind of hash it out before we put it in Zero Height, instead of dealing with the duplicates after the fact. As well as teams like marketing, localization is a huge one. Tech writers are really great people to talk to, support, developers, designers. I mean, it's really interdisciplinary. The whole idea of a style guide kind of touches on and impacts all teams, or many, many different teams throughout a company. So, so yeah, talking to more people, getting feedback from a lot of different perspectives, and then kind of applying that to the final product.
If I can mention from the designer's point of view, if you're a writer, it's great if you start sharing what you have as soon as possible. Like for example, small things like being unified on always saying subscription and not license, or always saying sign in and not log in, or sign up and create account, helped us a lot in my product team. Because I can't count how many times somebody came to me and was like, okay, so which one should I use? And I was like, well, it's this one. And then somebody else came. And then the first person forgot it, because obviously that's not their main job. So they're going to forget it in 2 or 3 weeks. So in the beginning, even if I would have a tiny document with just, let's say, top 10 things, it would already save me so much time. And you can just keep, adding more things into it as you go, as you learn more, as you research. But if you already have some basic thing, like don't be afraid to share it. It helps so much.
And I added a few of the tools that we use in the chat there. So off the top of my head, I had Grammarly, Figma, and Zero Height, and I know some other people are using Frontitude and Ditto. So yeah, feel free to look into any of those. Some of them are really helpful to a lot of people. Okay, let's see.
Thank you, Rihanna, for that feedback. That was really helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we work so closely with designers. It's really important to make sure that you're communicating. I think not really related to like the what would you do over, but like maintaining constant communication is super helpful. Just like running by. Even one of the greatest things that I've experienced in my current position is also having like Alyssa and Clayton to bounce ideas off of. It just helps a lot having people to talk to, and especially designers and developers have really great insights into copy related issues or things that you might need to kind of consider as you create new messages. So, yep.
Yeah, having other UX writers to bounce ideas off of must be great, isn't it?
I know.
I'm all alone in the company. But, okay, so Yana Cheska asks, is copy incorporated in your design system? How do you approach updates and or ownership of the copy? So like I said before, our design systems are a little fragmented right now. We're working on getting them combined. So currently, the people who own the UX writing portion are the UX writers. If you have multiple UX writers, you probably just talk amongst yourselves and figure out what you guys want to do. That's how when I was at Avast with Becca and Clayton, that's how we were doing the guide. We just sat in a room. We had a meeting room with a big projector TV, and we were going line by line, figuring out like what we wanted to say and things like that. Yeah, so that's probably it from my side. Becca, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Adriana spoke on this earlier and had a great answer about incorporating it into design systems, but also I think that's something that we are going to work more towards in the future. That's kind of part of our future plans for the style guide, is to get input from designers, also get their help with creating templates that we can add as examples. And then if there's something where the copy is consistent enough that we can put it in the design systems themselves as a placeholder, then that's great. But yeah, we do always want to look at it on a case-by-case basis, because yeah, it's not always like something where 100% this copy will work for this one specific thing. If anything about the experience or the functionality or the placement design changes, then the copy should also be reconsidered and rechecked to make sure that it's still working. So yeah, constant work in progress, I guess.
And kind of the constant work in progress point, and kind of going back to the last question, one of the things I probably would have done differently with the style guide, I probably would have released some finalized points sooner, because you're always going to feel like the guide is never done, because you're always going to feel like there are more things you have to cover. I probably would have had 2 different versions at one point, a draft with the things I wanted to do in the future and the stuff I had already done, and just put that first one out and just updated it later, because I spent so long just thinking, oh God, it's not done yet. It's not done yet. I just need to finish it. It's never finished, and it's never supposed to be. So that would be another tip from my side. Okay, next question. How do you deal with multi-language issues when it comes to style guides and consistency? I would say just work really closely with your localization team and make it really clear to them that, hey, if you don't understand what this is supposed to mean, maybe don't just give it your best guess. You're more than welcome to just come and ask us, and we'll help you understand like the idea behind it so that you can give a more accurate like translation, localization, or whatnot. Again, when I was trying Frontitude, I was trying some things where I saw some potential value with localization, but since it was hard to get it up off the ground, it was a little difficult in that regard. Well, one tip though, when working with localization, you do want to try to make your text as understandable as possible for as many people as possible. But that doesn't mean if something doesn't make sense in another language that you necessarily should change it in English. Because I've had some instances where localization comes back and says, hey, when I translate this to Russian, it doesn't make sense. So we need to change the text. And they're like, well, no, the job isn't to take the text and literally translate it, and it needs to make sense. The job is to, take what I've written, the idea of it, and then take that idea and convey it to that locale. So that's how I've been doing it. I'd like to improve it at some point and get something like some sort of content management system where we can have different versions all in one place and it's easy to find and all that, but that's future stuff. I haven't gotten to that yet, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I would also say that writing messages is with the most simple language you can find is one way to help with this. But we have also come across sometimes where we want to use something like an idiom or something culturally specific, which usually we try to avoid. But if there is something that fits really well, one thing you can do is give like a localization friendly alternative. So like something can,
absolutely, yeah.
You can write something in English that fits really well for design. And then you can ask localization if they have something in their language that means the same thing. And you can trust them. I think that's one of the ways that localization is really important, to kind of just make sure it's working for their language, their culture. And then if not, then we can write like a safer kind of, it's often like less I don't know, exciting, but like a safer version that will work for localization in a literal sense, if that makes sense. So sometimes we end up coming up with like 2 versions of copy, one for English and one localization safe version that can apply to all of the other languages.
Yeah, that's a really great idea too. Sometimes just leaving notes for localization on something, if you think this might be difficult for them to figure out, you can just leave a friendly little note like, hey, this is the core meaning behind it. This is it in its simplest form, and that's how they can take it to other people. Okay, let's see. We've got, looks like the last question in there. While we're answering this one, if you guys have any more, we could actually just do, you could just say it instead of writing it down if you want to, or you can write it down if you want to, or you're shy or something, no problem. Okay, so Christopher, what's the hardest part about working on a UX writer team of 1? How do you deal with that challenge? I would say the biggest, don't be laughing at me. I would say the biggest problem on my end, or one of the things I appreciated most when I was working at Avast, was I could literally just either look to my right and there's Becca there to be like, hey, what do you think of this? Or, you know, like peek over the desk and be Clayton, hey, come over here, look at this. Like just getting another set of eyes and another like mind to look at something. Sometimes people see something you missed. Sometimes they might think of like that one word that you've been struggling with all day to try to figure out. They might go, oh, it's this. Just bouncing things off of each other was really great. And I would like that again. We're trying to get it approved with finance to get more UX writers. One of the difficulties when you're a team of 1 too is that everybody wants you to proofread their stuff because you don't have enough time to be deep in the process and working with the designer side by side. And the way I kind of got around that was I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't do proofreading for everyone. And the compromise we came up with was the marketing copywriters would still proofread things just to catch the glaring mistakes. And then UX writers would work with a smaller number of teams, ideally maybe 1 or 2, and be more in that process. That way they can demonstrate the value that a UX writer being deeper in the process and more involved actually has. And once I was able to show that value of it is much better to have a writer side by side working on the same thing at the same time instead of coming in at the very end right before it goes to development, then they were able to say, yeah, there's a lot of value here, so let's try to find more eventually. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think almost all of us have like worked as a team of 1 at some point. And Clayton made a great point in the chat that it's so much easier to defend decisions as a team rather than as an individual, which is really
Absolutely.
true. And
absolutely.
Like, I can't like overstate the value of having someone to bounce ideas off of, because sometimes just after looking at the English language all day, I mean, it's just like doesn't even make sense to me anymore. So
basic words start looking weird sometimes.
Like the second guess like crazy when you're alone because you don't have someone to confirm what you're thinking. So I would say that if you are working as a team of 1, there are a lot of great communities out there. I would suggest finding the UX writing community on Facebook, UX Writers Hub, and there is also a really amazing Slack community that I just found recently. It's the Content Plus UX Slack group, so you can fill out a survey on Google Forms, and they will, I think they just go through those and admit people after they fill out the survey. But it's a great place where you can ask. And yeah, if you're working as a team of 1, you can find people who will help you and bounce ideas off of, and articles and resources, all sorts of stuff. But yeah,
I would also say, question. Could you? Oh, sorry. Never mind. Go ahead.
Sorry. Last thing, I would say you can also find other people within your company that will be really helpful. I would say the testing team was really helpful to me because they also often have a really great understanding of how things work. The support team talks to people all day long. They hear how they explain it when they have problems. They're a great resource of people to talk to. So outside of your developers and designers, talk to people from other parts of your company who have more firsthand experience with the customers themselves.
Technical writers can be really great as well. Sorry, I thought you were done. Sorry.
No, that was it.
Okay, okay. Technical writers are really great as well. They can sometimes, in certain ways, be more helpful than marketing copywriters because they do have some similar goals. Their job is to make things as understandable as possible for people and to help them through the process. And that is like one of the main goals of UX writers. So definitely there as well. Becca, would you, oh no, she just went off. Okay. She'll be back in a second. When you come back, if you mentioned a Google form or something like that, just a Slack group, you can throw that in the chat when you're back.
Yeah. I was
okay, cool.
For the next question because it's about books and resources. So I have some UX copy books. I was just going to
go grab them. Go for it. Sounds good. Sounds good. Most UX writers would say that the microcopy book is really great. That's basically one that everybody's read. I can't remember the woman's name or how to pronounce it. She's from Israel, but it's really helpful. I just started reading Sarah Richards' Content Design, so I actually have a bone to pick with them because they're a book about user, UX and all that stuff, but they uploaded their book to Kindle as a PDF. So you can only scroll through and zoom in and out. And you can't resize the text and change all the stuff that's great about Kindle. So I sent them a kind of annoyed email, like, you're writing a UX book, why would you not do this? But anyway, yes, somebody in the chat just put it in there. That's the woman's name in the microcopy book. It's a good book. Definitely check it out. Yeah, everybody's spamming the chat with it now. Did you have any other good ones? Yeah, I haven't gotten to that one yet. I've heard great things.
Tori Podmayarsky, she is amazing. She's a writer at Google. This one is a really great guide about testing as well. So there's some good info about that. She has some cool podcasts and stuff. I have this whole stack of books here because I'm in grad school and my master's thesis is also related to UX copy. So I just luckily purchased all of these books. This one, Nicely Said, by Nicole Fenton and Katie something Lee. This is a great guide for UX writing. This was one that and there was a talk by some of the Google UX writers, some other Google UX writers. They mentioned this one.
Was that the 2017 like how to write like Google one that everybody always quotes and is awesome and basically got me into some UX writing stuff?
I think so. I don't know if it's 2017, but maybe 2014. This one's from 2014.
Nice.
This is also a classic about UX in general.
It's a great title.
Yeah, the chapter on writing specifically is super short. It pretty much just says cut whatever you have on the screen in half and then cut it in half again. It's like very, very short description, but still helpful. This monster is a really cool guide. It's very comprehensive by Yahoo. They have like all sorts of different writing styles in here, so this one is really helpful. This one is
more.
I know, I'm sorry, you got me started, but I have like all these books here. There's some really good ones. I'll just go through a couple others. This one is about user research. These are both about like being a user experience researcher of one, which is really helpful.
Who writes those?
For like testing copy. I think that's a really important part of how you can figure out what to add to your guidelines. And then I also am a student of psychology and sociology. So these last ones are more like social science related, but I would recommend this one.
That's a good one.
Laptop. This is a researcher out of Stanford, and he did a lot of really amazing research about how people interact with computers and several things about language in there. I have more, but I'll
would you mind typing those out and like posting those in the meetup or something like that tomorrow?
Yeah,
sure. This is a lot of stuff, and some of those look really great, but I don't think everybody grabbed the title and authors and everything.
Yeah,
that'd probably be really helpful. I would like to see some of those as well because I've heard of most of those, but some of those are new to me. So Like, I'd like that.
Yeah, I was asking about the one about UX research. Yeah, if you could just share those, that'd be cool.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, does anyone else have any more questions? We got about 7 minutes left. Looking at the chat.
I just wanted to throw in the link to my LinkedIn profile if anybody's interested in connecting or talking more about this. I'm happy to answer any further questions or,
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let me do that too.
Yeah, holler at me anytime. And let me find that this content.
Just make sure you put in the note, like where you are coming from. That way I know, don't accidentally lose your request. But yeah.
Karen just asked, do you guys have any general UI tools that you love?
Figma.
Figma is great. I do really like Figma.
Yana put in the chat right as I said it. I'm famous for liking Figma. I used to work with Sketch. Yeah, I used to work with Sketch and it was god awful because you can't collaborate. Like designers will send you a snippet of it and then they'll keep working on their version and you send them a version back and then there are 2 versions. And then if they have some changes and they send you something else back, it just gets so freaking messy. And especially nowadays, I think they're actually going to finally release something collaborative after talking about it for like a year and a half. But anyway, you can collaborate now. You both can work on the same thing at the same time. You both can see each other's mouse on the screen. You can. I usually have my Zoom call here and I have Figma here, and so I can look somebody in the eye and still be designing like with them. So even with all this like COVID craziness, there's still some slight sense of normalness to all of this. But yeah, Figma's definitely great. Okay. Becca, you got a favorite tool?
I like Figma a lot. I like Miro too, but you can't use like the design, and that's like a really crucial part of creating copy, I think. I worked on a bunch of designs in Miro and I thought it was like great, and then as soon as I saw it in Figma, I was like, no, change like all of it again, just because like seeing it and being able to actually do it yourself and plug that copy in directly to the design makes such a huge difference. So yeah, I would say Figma as well, but I'm hoping that there will be more copy specific tools in the future. I think
Absolutely.
that like people are kind of starting to create them, but there aren't a lot of options at the moment. So I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that some people will develop some new copy tools for designers. Zero Height is another great tool, as we talked about tonight. Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. I also just posted that link to the UX copy Slack group, contentinux.org. So
let me click that.
Don't miss that. I don't know if Chris, are you going to send out like an email to all the people who attended with all this info, because it'll disappear once or like if there's a way, I don't know if there's a place where we can kind of collect all this info, or maybe
the
make
meetup
sure you
group is like on the meetup page. That would be a good place to put some. So, yeah, maybe I should copy down some of this stuff and put it in before we leave. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the meetup group as like a comment or something like that, and then I'm going to put it in the Facebook group as well.
You can also save the chat. I'm seeing now there's like
if you
click on the 3 dots, you can save chat. So maybe
I'll do that. Great. Yeah, you just saved me a bunch of work. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I'll set a reminder tomorrow morning to go through and pick out like the good bits, and I'll like all the links and resources and stuff, and I'll put that in the meetup group thing tomorrow. And for those of you in the Facebook group, I'll put it in the Facebook group as well.
So thank you all so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for coming out. It was really great seeing so many people, and that was a lot of fun. But yeah. Thanks, guys.
Good job, you
guys.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.